Hey, what's up, guys? Lelandbaptist here, and I have a story I want to share with you. Right. So what basically happened was I was at an event, and it was a training event for business, and we had to do introductions. And so I was introducing myself, and in part of my introduction, I just told something that was embarrassing, which was like, "Hey, I've lost millions of dollars in real estate." Right. And so what's pretty interesting is when you share things that are uncomfortable for you, things that are losses, things that you're embarrassed about, things that maybe that you're ashamed of, right? It's amazing how that alone will allow people or almost like give permission to others to be more transparent about who they are. And so by doing that, there was a guy, so I ended up sitting down and a guy came up to me the following day and was like, "Hey man, I was really touched by your story." I'm thinking like, "Oh, well, what about the story were you so intrigued of?" I didn't ask that. But his question was this. He was like, right now, my wife and I, we want to get into real estate, but we're trying to figure out whether or not to basically dump a down payment into a property, and we're not really even sure if that's something we want to do. He mentioned that he wants to do something for cash flow, and excuse me, sorry, his wife wants to do something for cash flow, but he wants to do something primarily for the equity. Okay. And I'm listening. And so he finally asked a question, right? And his question was, if I'm looking for, if my wife wants cash flow and I want equity, what should we do? And now ultimately you would think like, do both, right? But I told him, I said, you know what? I would actually preserve as much cash as possible. All right, so here's the advice that I gave the guy, right? And listen very closely because it's somewhat common sense, but a lot of times people just miss it. Think about the first thing I told him was not to quit his day job, right? Um, think about this. Do you happen to know what Warren Buffett does for a living, right? Most of us know Warren Buffett, the Oracle of Omaha, as a famous investor, right? Now, this famous, well known, and probably the best investor of our lifetime. Would you happen to know that this investor does not live off his investments? As a matter of fact, Warren Buffett has a W 2 job. In other words, he gets paid a salary from his company, Berkshire Hathaway. Now, think about this. Do you happen to know Shaquille O'Neal, right? If you don't know, Shaquille O'Neal is a NBA Hall of Famer who receives a NBA pension. He's also retired, obviously. In addition to that, he has tons of endorsements that he gets from different brand deals that he has. Would you also know that even Shaquille O'Neal has a W 2 income? In other words, he has a job. Like he works as a commentator at, I think it's like at TNT, right? Studio J with Ernie, um, with Steve, with the Jet Smith, with Kenny the Jet Smith, and also with Charles Barkley, right? Now let that sink in. These are gentlemen who probably don't need a traditional paycheck, but they understand that the importance with wealth is preserving it. And one of the best ways to preserve wealth is actually by having W 2 income. Now, W 2 income doesn't have to be from a job for someone else, it could be a job from your own company. The reason the W 2 income is so important is because it keeps you within a certain tax bracket. I then went ahead and let the guy know step number two, or the important thing, which is you want to invest. Now, don't invest in real estate or any investment solely to live off of your investments. I've made that mistake before, and it's a costly one. It's very stupid, too. When I would live off of my investments for real estate, what would happen a lot of times is I would only be able to basically receive income once a month. And that was typically near the middle or the end of the month. Let me give an example. I would have a property or various properties in which tenants paid rent. Now, tenants pay rent once a month. Those tenants would pay rent. There will be other expenses tied to that property, things like property taxes, mortgage, and sometimes utilities, depending on the size of the building. Once those things were paid, I typically had about to the 15th to make mortgage payments without having a late fee. After the 15th, the money that was left over was money that I quote unquote would live off of. But if you think about it, I was waiting till like the 16th, or basically the middle or even the end of a month, to be able to quote unquote take care of my needs, right? The dumbest thing I ever did. And I don't encourage you guys to do it. Instead, what I encourage you to do is to maintain your day job, keep your keep your W-2 job, right? Like a LeBron James. LeBron James plays for the Lakers at this point, and that's his W-2 income. But he then goes ahead, he takes that W-2 income, and he then will invest into other assets, aka alternative assets. These alternative assets, such as Blaze, like equity in businesses, right? Small businesses, such as real estate, such as cryptocurrency, etc., etc., etc. This is how wealth is built. That W-2 income allows you to maintain a particular taste or standard of living. As you are continuously investing some of your W-2 income, you're building up your asset level, and you're also building up your passive income and your portfolio income. And because you're maintaining your W-2 income, you don't have the need or the urge to dip into that portfolio income, to dip into that passive income. Because remember, there are three types of income. We have passive, we have portfolio, and then we have what's called earned income. Now, keep in mind, earned income is taxed the heaviest. However, earned income is income that is probably the most obtainable for most people. Portfolio income is something that has to deal with basically an asset. And so you think about it, even something as small as investing in the stock market, that helps you build that portfolio income. And many times, you don't have a taxable event until you take that money out of circulation. Now, if you maintain earned income, there's really no need to ever have to take that money out of circulation, right? Because you have a W-2 income, you're setting aside money for an emergency, you're saving money, et cetera, et cetera. So it begins to make more and more sense. And as your portfolio income is growing, as well as your passive income with things like real estate and small business equity, you now have the ability to lower your tax bracket and to be charged less and less on taxes, which leads us to number three. I let him know that the best bet that I would offer him would be to maintain his day job, look for ways to purchase a duplex, triplex, or fourplex, use the FHA loan as a 3.5% down payment. Now, at that moment, he stopped me. He said, "Hey, listen, the current home that he and his wife have is on an FHA mortgage." I let him know that although you can only have one FHA mortgage at a time, you do have the ability to use an FHA mortgage over and over and over again. What does that mean? That means his current home that has an FHA mortgage, he could convert that through a rate and term or refinance into a conventional mortgage. That then allows him to utilize the FHA mortgage again, which is a 3.5% down payment. At that point, he can look for a quote unquote duplex, triplex, or quad, or even a mixed use building in which he can put a 3.5% down payment. By doing that, he's able to occupy, and again, you can occupy this whether it's long term or short term, but he can occupy that property in which he's occupying one of the three or the four or the five units, and then he can lease out the remainder. Now imagine this. Imagine that he looked for a mixed use building in which there are four residential units on the second floor. And on the first floor, there is maybe room for a coffee shop and another small restaurant, maybe even a dry cleaners, just hypothetically, right? He now has an asset that has the ability to have up to five or six modes of revenue from that one single asset. And what that does is when it comes time for him to do his taxes, it increases his overall income. Now, the next step that I told him about, the more and more assets and alternative assets that he is able to acquire, he can begin through the right accounting, et cetera, by offsetting his taxable income by taking losses, as long as he's, reinvesting in the property, he's having maintenance, property managers, et cetera, et cetera. By doing this, it allows him to keep and maintain more of his income. It allows him to build equity into the properties. It allows him to have more cash flow. And then ultimately, in a year or two, he's able to then go ahead and repeat the process over and over again. Before he knows it, he'll have millions of dollars worth of real estate. He'll have passive income, i.e., a passive portfolio, and he'll also have a more he'll have more security when it comes to his portfolio income, things like his 401k, IRA, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the last tip that I gave him, this is really, really important, is he wants to make sure that he protects his assets the right way. Now, many people understand about, an LLC, which is a limited liability corporation. Something that people don't always look into is also the ability to have what's called a trust, TRUST. Now, having a trust allows you to have more ambiguity between who owns what. Whereas if someone has a property in a LLC, limited liability corporation, in many, many states, you can pierce that veil and be able to see who actually owns and or is an operator of that organization. So if you want to maybe protect those assets and ultimately have generational wealth, something you can pass on to others, then what you really want to focus on is protecting your assets by using a trust, TRUST. So nonetheless, I hope you guys got a lot from this video. I broke down quite a few steps, and it may seem, I don't know, daunting, but it's not. Ultimately, you want to keep this in mind. Within the Midwest and some parts of the Southeast of the United States, the average home as far as like a duplex or triplex, can be purchased for ranging anywhere from $70,000 up to about $225,000. Now, if someone has the ability to acquire a property using what's called an FHA loan, right? That's a 3.5% down payment. That means your down payment can range anywhere from about $2,800 all the way to about $8,000. If you think about it, that's a great way to get started, especially if someone's credit score is hovering around like a 620 FICO. That means like the median credit score. Now, for most FHA loans, they want to see that you file your taxes at least 2 years consistently in the same or similar type of industry for a 2 year period of time. So keep in mind the importance of doing that. All right. So if you can check those boxes, then you can actually qualify for an FHA mortgage. Now, for some of those millennials and Gen Zs who went to expensive colleges, you may or may not have some difficulties based on what's called a debt to income ratio, or DTI. However, there are various programs that are out there that I would highly encourage you to look into to figure out how to offset your DTI. Now, keep in mind when you're talking to that mortgage loan officer that you let him or her know that you're seeking out a duplex, triplex, or fourplex. The reason for this is because these types of properties have the ability to bring in income from the other units. And by doing such, an underwriter will add the potential income of those units to your personal qualification to qualify for more of the property, even if the property itself at the moment is vacant. All right. Hope you guys enjoyed that. If you have any other questions, please let me know in the comments. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.